Ready to hit the road again?
I'm very excited. Let's go.
After a 2-month hiatus, we're back on the road and taking you along to spend a summer with the Newstates in New England. From picturesque port cities to delicious dining and fascinating history, we're kicking off our road trip north with a stop in Salem, Massachusetts. We're Howard and Caitlin Newstate, dog people, food people, adventure people. We've been living on the road for the past 4 years, traveling through North America and beyond. Each week, we bring you along with us to show you how to live like a local in every new state we visit.
This has been on my list for a very long time. I'm fascinated by the history. It is both sad and intriguing and kind of spooky.
We're heading to Salem, Massachusetts.
All right, you ready to hit the road?
Yep.
All right, let's go. We've driven the RV like through or around New York a couple of times, and every time we do it, my anxiety is like through the roof, and Howard just does it like a champ. Oh my god.
No problem.
He also used to live here. We made it to Winter Island Park, which is the only RV park in the entire area of Salem. So if you want to be close to the action, this is kind of it. And they have a waterfront section, which is like the most coveted. It's still like a parking lot, but it's right on the harbor. And then we're here in the RV field. And because I just booked this literally 2 days ago, there were only a couple of spots left. We got a great spot right here on the end. And I think it's about 2 miles into town. There is a trolley, so if you don't have a tow vehicle or bikes or anything like that, you can hop on the trolley and take that into town. I have read that people have walked it and, gotten their steps in and all of that good stuff. We're either gonna take the bikes or the car and go check out some of the sites. But first, we gotta set up.
Before we go any further, the last time you saw us here on YouTube, we didn't have a tow vehicle. Our last CRV died in the fall, and we were driving around the RV and using our electric e-bikes. Well, earlier this year, one of our Newstate Navigators reached out letting us know they would be selling their CRV that was all set up for towing already, and we just couldn't pass it up. So I flew to Florida, met up with Lou. Hi, Lou.
And Lou, what am I doing?
Picking up a new CRV, our CRV, new to them.
And drove our new-to-us CRV back to meet up with Howard. And we love having a tow car again. Okay, back to Salem. Our first night in Salem was all about checking out some of the local food scene, and we had just enough time before dinner to grab a drink at Far From the Tree Cider, serving up hard craft cider made from local apples. And our flight gave us a variety of flavors to try.
I liked both the least sweet and the most sweet. Those are my two favorite. And you loved the smoothie one, which I was very shocked about.
Well, it tasted like a smoothie. It tasted like bananas, strawberries, and apples. It was good.
And I love banana, but I don't know, the banana was just a little bit too much for me.
Well, the zaddy was tart.
That was
good.
Really good, yeah.
This is our first crawler, isn't it, Caitlin?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can fill with whatever you want.
So if you don't like sweet, or if you do like sweet, they have like a wide variety of all different kinds of ciders. Highly recommend it.
We heard from several of you that a meal at Turner's Seafood is a must. Turner's began as a wholesale seafood company out of Boston in the 50s and has grown into a local institution with restaurants and markets across New England. We ordered mussels and haddock that were both incredible and very fresh. The location here in Salem is housed in the building where Alexander Graham Bell demonstrated the first ever long-distance phone call when he called his assistant in Boston in 1877. To cap off our first night, we found some delicious homemade ice cream just down the street from Turner's Seafood.
So excited. I got banana Nutella with peanut butter cups after I just said that I didn't like the banana smoothie. And then the other one is a salted caramel gluten-free brownie.
These flavors are, like, no pun intended with the bananas part. One of these tastes just like buttered popcorn.
And it's not super overwhelming. Like, it was actually really good.
Yeah, so I got buttered popcorn and then white mint.
You got nothing.
Salem is infamous for the witch trials of 1692, and they've certainly embraced the notorious and dark history from a tourism standpoint. Nicknamed the Witch City, you can visit kitschy places like the Salem Witch Museum or the Witch Dungeon Museum. But we opted for a virtual guide of the city to not only learn about the witch trials, but dig deeper into the overall history of Salem.
You can download an app, and it's a self-guided tour of Salem. And they have 3 different levels, and we selected the highest level, which for one price, it gives you 3 days of access. So even if you're here for several days, you can pick up and resume and explore the city.
It's called Salem on Your Own, so you can kind of go your own pace, explore Salem.
What an original name! Salem on Your Own.
Keep it simple, right?
That's right. Yeah, so you just use any pair of headphones and the mobile app, and you have a tour guide in your pocket. We're walking along Chestnut Street, which has one of the highest concentrations of 18th and 19th century buildings in the United States. It's an incredible collection of largely privately owned properties, some of which used to house people as famous as Nathaniel Hawthorne, author of The Scarlet Letter.
Okay, this one's my favorite. I just love that it's covered in the ivy like that. I think it looks super cool. It's kind of funny, it's the Ropes Mansion and there's all these ropes everywhere in the garden.
These audio tours are great because you learn a lot of information that you wouldn't otherwise know about. For instance, this house seems to have a really nasty habit of killing its owners. Starting with Nathaniel in 1774, he was a loyalist to the King of England, and a mob attacked him and left him for dead in the front yard of this house.
And then several years later, his wife met a horrible untimely death when she walked too close to her fireplace and her robe caught on fire and she burned to death. I mean, yeah, there's some speculation that this house is haunted. It's also famous because if you're a fan of the movie Hocus Pocus, you might recognize it as one of several houses that was featured in that movie. And Salem in general has like a really dark history, not only because of the witch trials, but there's like a murders and mysteries tour that you can take, I was reading, and there's just all kinds of like dark stuff that happened in this area.
Imagine that your cottage industry for your town is witches and murders.
Yes. These poor women and some men who were tried and executed, and like what they would think about it today being kind of like sensationalized and turned into like this big tourism jackpot. It's just like fascinating and sad to think about. This is the witch house, but it's actually the home of the judge who presided over several of the trials back in the 1600s. It's the last structure that the public can tour with direct ties to those trials. And it's now owned by the city, and it's a museum that you can go in and tour.
There's a touching memorial in the middle of town dedicated to those who were executed after the infamous witch trials. Our audio guide told us stories of how they were accused of, quote, witchcraft, stood trial, and were eventually killed. One woman, Rebecca Nurse, was a 71-year-old grandmother who spoke out against the hiring of a religious leader. She was hanged. George Burroughs was a 42-year-old minister who was executed for his religious beliefs. 80-year-old Giles Corey was pressed to death over 3 days after he refused to enter a plea. He had been accused by a group of young girls in town who claimed he was a wizard. And these are just a few of the stories of those who were wrongfully convicted, shining a different light on the term witch hunt. Sitting adjacent to the witch trials memorial is Salem's oldest burial ground, where the leading judge who presided over those trials was laid to rest.
One thing that I noticed before we even started learning anything about it was how skinny and narrow the tombstones are. Like tombstones that you see in more modern cemeteries today are much more grand and thicker, and these are just kind of almost like paper thin.
From what I understand too, these are actually the second generation of them because the original ones were wood, and obviously the wood did not survive, so then they were slowly replaced by stone. But the configuration is very specific to Puritans. They were very specific as to the way in which the cemetery would be laid out, as well as the stones and the configuration of the stones.
And then another interesting thing too is the artwork that's on them. You'll see a lot more crossbones and skulls and things that by today's standards were considered kind of spooky, but they weren't allowed to use like angels and more heavenly images on their tombstones.
Right, it was like a warning. They say it was like a warning. The Puritans were trying to warn those that death is coming and basically to heed God. And so what better way to do that than to have really scary tombstones in your cemetery?
Everybody always wants to visit Salem in the fall for Halloween, but I'm here to tell you, don't sleep on Salem in the summer. This is beautiful.
That's a lot of
And
essence.
yes, I practiced that in my head like 5 times. But no, for real, like it's blooming and everything's green and the weather, it's a little chilly today, but it's perfect. Like this is just great. So I would highly recommend that. And it's not as crazy busy as it would be in Halloween or in the fall.
And to give you an idea of how crazy it gets, in October, even parking is more expensive, and they have special restrictions in place so that way the locals of Salem still have some place to park and some place to go when there's all of these crowds everywhere.
Okay, we just had a delicious lunch at Gulugulu Cafe, and it was amazing.
Yeah, recommendations for the win.
I know. Thank you, Drifter Kate.
No, that place has something for everyone, regardless of if you are a particular person, if you have an allergy, whatever it is, they can make everything because everything is made in-house and fresh.
I loved all the dogs. There's like dogs everywhere, tons of pugs too. So if you're a dog lover, it's definitely like Instagrammable. I'll take any excuse to drink coffee. I got an oatmeal cookie latte, and then I don't even know what the heck Howard got. It's like a whole thing.
It's got custard, and it's got bubbles in it, the boba teas, you know. It's good.
It is really good.
I don't know. So as luck would have it, we ran into Reverend Ives of St. Peter's Episcopal Church.
There's so much history and just fascinating facts about this church here. And the walking tour brought us here. We probably never would have stumbled upon it had it not been for the tour.
One of the people who was accused of witchcraft ultimately donated the land that the church sits on. And the first cast bell from 1740 is inside this church and continued to ring for 200 years.
Yeah.
Until I guess recently, because of updates or renovations, they can't ring it anymore.
They're working on getting it ringing again, but he said it has rung for every death of every US president, which is also just mind-boggling to think about how long that is.
There are a number of gravestones in the front of the church. Some are also inside. Over 100 people were buried in the area that eventually became the chapel. They moved as many gravestones as they possibly could, but actually built the chapel over the cemetery. They didn't disturb the bodies though, and they're still under there.
No. And another body that is buried there, and you can actually see the headstone for him in the front, was the inspiration for Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter. He's a character in that.
That's right.
We were telling the Reverend that through our travels, we've visited a lot of churches all across the world, and we have never seen that before, where essentially like the headstone or the gravestone is separate from where the body is actually buried and has been moved.
And then we found out we're actually talking to a celebrity.
I know. It crossed my mind just because of how he was dressed, but he was so friendly. He was out front watering the flowers. So if you ever see this, thank you for chatting with us.
Reverend Ives, thank you.
Salem is full of all of these like really cool tidbits. So this is the old Salem Jail behind me. Across the street used to be Parker Brothers, which made board games, and Monopoly was one of those. So there is speculation that the, don't pass go and collect, what is it? Do not,
One more time.
what is it? Do not pass.
I'll just say there's speculation.
Okay. So there's speculation that the is where the do not pass go, do not collect $200, head straight to jail actually came from. There's speculation that the saying, go to jail,
Have you played Monopoly before? Because Caitlin apparently has not. You know the phrase,
see,
no. You know the phrase.
go to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200,
That's right.
came from here.
Right, because from outside their window, they could see the jail. So that kind of makes sense if you think about it. Great job by us.
Ooh, high five on that one. All right, guys, I got my Salem souvenir, and I'm really excited about it. I saw this in the window, and it's so comfortable. Look how cute. I will be wearing this in every episode from here on out. Just kidding, but isn't that awesome? I love it.
All right, well, just across the bridge from Salem is the town of Beverly. And in Beverly is a place that you are not going to believe how cheap seafood can be.
Secret spot.
Yeah,
Found out from a local.
yeah, this is the best kind of, this is a Newstate Nomads exclusive. smokes. This is a great deal.
Yeah, it is. Oh my
It's delicious, freshly steamed lobster. The lobster and one side was $33. 2 crab cakes were $6.
Clam chowder,
Clam chowder.
$3.50. Yeah, awesome. Can't eat the lungs. And there's meat in here. This is where my crab picking skills come in. The less glamorous side of lobster eating. So what are your impressions of Salem?
I really like Salem because I feel like it is a living history experience, but it is a modern city. Right next door to these highly historic locations are modern buildings and places where you can get boba tea. And I like that.
And we're here on a random Tuesday, so I would recommend doing your research and making sure that the things you really want to see and do are in fact open, because a lot of the stuff was not today.
We are at the nation's first National Historic Site, which I didn't know that coming into this. A number of the locations are either only operating on the weekends, or unfortunately because of staffing or because of COVID, they're not operating at all this year. The ship that's behind us, on the weekends, they offer tours, and so you're able to go on board. This is a replica of a very famous cargo ship. Merchant ship? Cargo ship? See, this is why we wish that it was open, because I would learn about it.
And whether you do an actual guided tour or one of the audio tours, like a self-guided tour, do a tour in some way, shape, or form, because you learn so much more that way. Like, there was stuff that we never would have known or never would have walked that way to go check out. Highly recommend that.
Coming up this summer, get ready for maximum lobster and maximum fun as we partner with Visit Maine to take you on a beautiful road trip along the coast. In our 4-part series, get ready to go behind the scenes, out on the water, and try some of the most incredible dishes from across Maine. The journey begins next week. We'll see you then.